I want to talk about the Texas shooting. Now, we still don't have all the facts, but it appears that at this point, about 15 people are dead, and that the shooter appears to be, again, a white nationalist. Uh, Let me just say right up front, this is terrorism. I mean, he should be treated as a terrorist. I hope Texas throws the book at him. I hope, maybe this will happen in Texas, that he gets the death penalty, because there's no excuse for what he did. What I want to talk about is, the question of why are we seeing more of this? Why are white nationalists on the rise? And I think we should, not only should we be able to understand this if we look at fairly recent history, we should also understand that we're likely, on all probability, going to see more and more and more of it. Why is that? A couple of reasons. If you look at the United States isn't held together by ethnicity, race, religion, not even language, really. It's held together by a set of ideals. And Americans are people who adhere to, understand, and appreciate those ideals. Now, what happens in a country like that when those ideals are destroyed? And we know this from, at least from my point of view, recent history. What happened to the Soviet Union? The Soviet Union was held together not by ethnicity, it was a multinational empire, if you will. It was held together by a concept, a principle, a system. That system was communism. When communism collapsed in the late 80s, and it no longer was the glue that held this multinational empire together, what happened? All these people broke away. The Estonians, Latvians, Lithuanians, Ukrainians, Belarus, Moldova, Kazakhstan, all the other stands, they all split away from the Soviet Union. All the ethnicities popped up, and you had these problems. You're still seeing problems today between Ukrainians and Russians that are still going on. Chechnya, and that's because the glue that held the Soviet Union together was communism. And when you took that glue away, the pieces fell apart. Think of it as a mosaic. You have a mosaic and you have all the pieces and it forms a picture. But all the individual pieces are glued in with some kind of cement, something that fixes them to the picture. And if you undermine that, if you do something, you get it too hot or it gets too cold or whatever, it freezes and it starts to fall apart. All the little pieces start falling apart. That's what happened to the Soviet Union. Let's look at Yugoslavia. There's another multinational country with all these different nationalities. Some of them even have different religions, different languages, but they were all held together by Tito and by the ideal of communism. They weren't Croatians, they weren't Macedonians, they weren't whatever, Bosnians, they were Yugoslavians. Now I knew people before the collapse of Yugoslavia who came and told me that was bullshit. That he didn't see himself as a Yugoslavian. He said Yugoslavians were artificial and it wouldn't hold up. And of course it did. When Tito died and the system fell apart, what happened? All the different ethnic groups spun away. And the ethnic groups where they were intermingled started killing each other. The Bosnian Muslims and the Bosnian Serbs and Croatians and Slovenians. It was a big mess. And it took a while for that to sort itself out. And there's still problems there today with some of these ethnic groups. So think about that, and then look at what's happening in the United States today. We have this ideal, this sense of being an American, of the United States as being a country held together by a bunch of principles and ideals and political principles, not ethnicity, not religion, not language, not color, certainly. What have we been doing for the last 20 years? We've been doing two things. On the one hand, there are politicians in this country, and we know who they are. I don't think I need to identify them, who are systematically going after the institutions that define Americanism. We need to get rid of the Constitution. We need to get rid of the Second Amendment. We need to get rid of the Electoral College. The founders were all racists. The founding of the country wasn't a great thing. It was mythological. It was a travesty. We trashed the Indians. We're a terrible country. We committed all these sins. And what that's doing is destroying this concept of Americanism. And what are they proposing to replace it with? Ultimately, socialism. But they're not there yet. And in the meantime, one of the ways they're trying to undermine the existing structure is to focus on what's generally called, ethnic politics. That they, focus on the black vote, focus on the Hispanic vote, focus on this vote, focus on that vote. All the different colors of people are cut out from being American, and they all have their own issues. We just had Presley, one of the Gang of Four, saying, black people should speak with a black voice, brown people should speak with a brown voice, Indians should speak with an Indian voice, Muslims should speak with a Muslim voice. That's fine. So you break the thing down into these constituent parts, all these little pieces of the mosaic, and you go away chopping away at the cement that holds them together. And what's left? I've been saying for several years on Facebook and other places that if you continue to do that, sooner or later, people who identify as black, brown, and red, you're going to start seeing some, not all, but some white people, and an increasing number of white people will start identifying as white. And that's a problem in this country because they still make up 70% of the population. You don't really want to go there. That's not a good place to go. But that's what we've been doing for at least 25 years, maybe longer, is breaking this thing down to the politics of ethnicity, the politics of color. And you can't keep empowering black people and brown people and all these other color peoples and not expect white people to say, I'm going to empower myself. And they will. Now, I'm not saying that justifies going in and doing what this asswipe did, but I'm saying this is why you're going to see more of this stuff, because the things that if you read his crap which he put out there and trying to justify invasion of Hispanics and all that stuff, it's truly nonsense. But he's identifying. Once you start, if you want to empower Hispanics, inevitably you're going to start empowering people to see themselves as white and all the things that could go with them, and you're going to see more of this stuff. So these people keep saying we see the rise of white supremacists in this country, and it's true, and we're going to see even more of it, and our politics are leading us to where this is going to happen, because just like the Soviet Union, just like Yugoslavia, we're in the process of destroying the cement that holds the mosaic together. And that's the idea of Americanism. Once you destroy that idea, until you get to their idea that they're going to get to socialism someday, and then that'll be the new cement that's going to hold things together, like it did so well in the Soviet Union and in Yugoslavia. But until you get there, as you go through this transition period, they are setting themselves up for Yugoslavia. That people are going to increasingly see themselves in their little nook, their little cranny, they're going to speak, brown people will speak like for brown people, and black people will speak like black people, and Muslims will speak like Muslims, and white people will speak like white people. Of course, not all of them, because a lot of them are very good liberals and everything else. But there are a lot of people out there who aren't. And increasingly, that's where we're going to go. And you have to keep in mind they're not only are they 70% of this country, they're probably pretty well armed. A lot of these people who are most likely to go in that direction. So we're going to. This is a terrible thing. It is terrorism. I mean, I'm not trying to excuse it in any way, shape, or form. I'm just saying, if you look at the forces that are at work here, I mean, nothing excuses some of the crap that went on in Yugoslavia. But as a historian, you look at the forces. Why are they there? How did they get there? Why did they start killing each other? Why did the Ukrainians and Russians, and to most Americans, if you had two of them, you couldn't tell one from the other. And if even they were speaking, you probably couldn't tell it was a different language. But they understand. And then they're killing themselves, invading Crimea. They're massacring each other in eastern Ukraine. We know what happened in Yugoslavia with the war crimes and the massacres and the slaughters and all this stuff. And that happened because in Yugoslavia, the cement that held that mosaic together disintegrated. And we're in the process of the left in this country is doing everything it can to disintegrate the adhesive that holds pieces of the American mosaic in place. And as the mosaic breaks loose and the pieces start floating around, you're going to have violence. And that's where we're headed. That's why I've been saying for 2 years now, we're headed for civil war in this country. Because if you look at the forces, we're destroying, again, we're destroying the things that hold the country together. I mean, what if you look even at the Civil War, which was horrible? If we had it today, it would be 7 million dead. But you look at, yes, slavery was a big deal, huge deal, and it separated the country. But in almost every other level, you didn't really see that. I mean, tariffs, it was a minor problem. Most of them believed in the American ideal. They all believed in the founding. They were all mostly white. They were Anglo-Saxon Protestants or other kinds of Protestants, some Germans, and you had a bunch of Catholics. But they all pretty much adhered to the same things. I mean, if you look at the Confederacy, they're putting out stamps with the founders on them. And in the North, they're putting out stamps with the founders on them. I mean, they revered the Declaration. They had problems with the Constitution as it had worked out with slavery. But beyond that, they believed in the American concept. And even with all that, we still had a civil war. If we have a civil war today, caused by whatever eventually is going to spark it, it's going to be far, far worse. Because today we're really divided. We don't agree. If you look at the right and the left, there's a religious divide. There's an ethnic divide. There's a divide of ideals. There's a divide of philosophy. There's even a divide of science. People talking about, math is racist and science is racist. I mean, if you look at all these things, we're far more divided today than we were going into the Civil War. And eventually you're going to get something that's going to spark something off. I don't know what it will be. I can't see into the future that far. But it's coming. And if you look at the polls, I mean, when I first said it was going to be a civil war, not many people thought that. And then I saw a poll that said, like a third of the people think that we're headed towards civil war. And now the number is pushing up to about 50%, just under 50% into the 40s. Each year it's getting worse. And if you go back and you look at the Civil War, people saw it coming. It was like this storm on the horizon that was coming in. And they didn't know what to do about it. And we're not doing anything here either. There's just everything being done is an effort to destroy the institutions of this country, to destroy the ideals of America, to destroy the concept of America, destroy the history of America, the mythology, painting over the pictures of Washington, pulling down all the statues, not the Civil War generals, that doesn't get me all that worked up, but other statues. We're doing away with Jefferson Jackson Day and the Democratic Party. And you can't keep doing this stuff and playing identity politics with all these subgroups without eventually getting an increasing number of white people to identify as white people and to want to speak with a white voice, not an American voice, with a white voice. And that's what we are increasingly seeing in this country. And it's very dangerous. And that's why I said we're headed towards civil war. And nobody's doing anything about it. I mean, if anybody's doing anything about it, there's people on the left just pushing us down the road, going after institution after institution after institution after institution. Destroy them, destroy them, destroy them, destroy them. And I think it was Iowa Hawk said, then you scalp them and you wear the scalp around your waist. That's what's happening in this country. But as you destroy these institutions, the institutions that hold this country together, political institutions, church, the economy, business, professionalism, you destroy all those institutions, there's nothing left. And then all hell's going to break loose. And that's where we're headed. Fortunately, I'm probably not going to live long enough to see this because I'm in pretty bad shape. But for those of you who are under 60, look out. because you may have it's like I said, if we have a civil war in this country, and I think one is coming, it's not going to be like the last civil war, where we didn't shoot. For the most part, we didn't shoot prisoners. I mean, there are always, they shot some black soldiers, and there were massacres of prisoners here and there, and bad treatment in uh, prisoner war camps, although that was normal at the time. But think of what went on between the Reds and the Whites in the Russian Civil War, or between the Nationalists and the Republicans in the Spanish Civil War, when you did have massacres, where you did have mass executions when the war was over. I mean, in Russia, in the Russian Civil War, when the whites surrendered, they were shot, they were killed, put in a mass grave, executed. Not like Robert E. Lee, where he gets to go home and be a president of a university and live out his life till he dies of a heart attack. I mean, when they captured these people, they killed them, and Franco pretty much did the same thing, or worked them to death in work camps. Uh, that's where we're headed. And that was because in our Civil War, other than the issue of slavery, politically, both sides pretty much shared the same sets of ideals, other than the one issue of slavery. Today, if there's a civil war, the different sides do not share ideals. They don't share religion. They don't share political convictions. They don't share philosophical convictions. They don't share economic convictions. They don't share anything. They don't share a love of the country. They don't share a belief in the founding. They don't revere the founders, or think that we're special in the world. So when push comes to shove and the Civil War does break out, it's going to be one bloody mess. And this is we're just at the beginning. And like I said, what happened today in Texas, from all appearances, and maybe things will change, maybe this is bad news reporting, I don't know. But from what I've seen, it looks like a white nationalist, and he looks like an asshole. And again, it is terrorism, and we should have the FBI and all the other groups treating them just like we do Al Qaeda or any of these other groups. Terrorism is terrorism. He should be treated like a terrorist, and hopefully he'll be treated worse than the terrorists we have, because I don't know of any Al Qaeda people that we've actually executed. I hope this guy does get executed, not stuck in Guantanamo for 10 years or 20 years. But there's going to be more of it. So brace yourselves.